Hello, Tabitha.
Hello.
Having just collected you from the ferry port at Saint-Malo this morning, welcome home.
Thank you.
At least welcome home to your French home. You have just come from England from your English home. So you are, like us, very lucky. You have two homes. Tell me, where do you feel most at home?
Both. When I'm in France, I want to be in England, but then when I'm in England, I want to be in France because I love them both so much, and I always miss one, whichever house I'm not at. So I think I feel equally at home in both, which is both nice, but then also a bit sad because it means I'm always sort of missing the other home.
So that's as far as the place is concerned. What about the language? Which language do you feel most comfortable in?
I do still feel more comfortable in English. I think I still have a slightly wider vocabulary in English. For example, I don't know all the French, like the technical French words, like plumbing or related, or things that you wouldn't necessarily use with your friends, because that's where I learn most of my French from, I think, and that's I think how I've always really learned it. So I still find English easier, but
So
I'm
you know all the
in
plumbing
French.
terminology in English, do you? Is that what you're saying?
No, slightly more, slightly more.
Okay. Well, that brings me on very nicely to what I'm really interested to ask you, and that's how you learned French. You came to France when you were only 3.
Yeah.
Do you have any or many memories from that time of your life?
Not really. Just a couple of memories from playing in the playground, but I don't ever remember the language being a barrier, which I guess it must have been slightly at the beginning, before I could speak French. But I think I did have an English girl in my class, so maybe that also helped to reduce the barrier or something. I'm not sure.
Okay.
But I don't ever remember the French language being an issue.
So do you remember learning it at all?
No, I think in all my memories I kind of knew it already, or
okay.
I don't know.
So in your mind, you've always been able to speak French, just like you've always been able to speak English.
Yeah, I think so.
It's really interesting. Now, you went back to England when you were only 6.
Yeah, or 5.5 even, I think.
Or 5.5. Now, do you remember how that felt going into an English school as what must have appeared like a French girl at that stage?
Again, I think I don't have really any memories of it.
Okay.
I can imagine not being too uneasy. I think it was probably quite normal because at home we always spoke in English, so my English was still very good. Maybe not the written, and I think the only issue I did have was that all my friends and everyone at school in England had already started learning to read, whereas in France it's done slightly later. And I think it made me kind of frustrated that I wasn't at the same level as them, so I had to work a bit harder to catch up. But eventually, I gained a love of reading from that. So
yes,
it wasn't a long-term issue.
For French viewers, Tabitha, can you just say which French years you did spend here?
So I started in Petite section, and went to grande section. So I never did CP, which is where you do learn to read and write. And then I went in back to England, and I went into year 1, I believe. And because the years are grouped differently in England and France, I essentially went down a year when I went to England, because they group their years from September to August, whereas in France it's the year groups based from January to December.
Okay, so you went back when you were a little girl, and you and your family continued to come to France for holidays.
Yes.
But a few years later, when you were 13, I believe, you decided you wanted to come back to France. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so I really wanted to come back, and originally it was an idea for just a year, to kind of immerse myself back into French, because although I could still speak French thanks to going on holiday there often, I felt like I lacked a lot of the basic grammar rules and mostly vocabulary. Because when I left, I was only 6. I only knew basic schoolgirl words, which obviously French people would learn more as they grew up. But because I was learning it all in English, I felt like I was losing a lot of that in French. And I I just really wanted to come back and live in France again, I guess.
Okay, so it was supposed to be perhaps just a year, but it wasn't. So tell me what happened.
So when I came back to France, I went into troisième, and I think the head teacher of the school was quite anxious, and I think most teachers at the school were worried that I was going to struggle to keep up, and that I wasn't even going to be able to get my brevet, and they thought that I'd maybe have to redouble. But luckily, I managed to get it, and although my French was still a bit iffy in some areas, like in French lessons, I was still definitely lacking the conjugated verbs and everything, which is quite confusing in French. And I think even if some French people still struggle with that, I managed to pass, so that was great. And I found this school in Rennes, which had an international section, so I could have some lessons in English, including English literature and history and geography. And I felt like it was the perfect balance between going back to England and studying in English, or staying in France and studying in French. And my mum and, well, both my parents really were very open to the idea of potentially staying, which and I really appreciate, because I've ended up having a great 3 more years at lycée, and I've now got my baccalaureate.
Congratulations, yeah.
Which I'm very pleased with. So I've worked hard. But,
and as your mother, I can vouch for the fact that you have worked very hard, so you deserve it, so well done. And she got a mention très bien. I'm allowed to say that, I think, even if you're not. So we are now recording this at the very end of August 2022, and what are you going to do now?
So I just spent all summer in England, and I was working in an English tea room as a waitress, which I really enjoyed, because I was therefore spending a couple of months back in England, which, as I mentioned earlier, because I love both homes, I wanted to go back for a bit and spend a bit of time there. But now I'm back in France to start university. I'm going to be staying in Rennes and going to study economics and management. And once again, I'm doing an international section within that degree, where I will have all my economics lessons in English. So once again, keeping that balance between English and French.
Okay, excellent. And did you consider going back to England or Britain for university?
I did, and I even applied, and I went through UCAS, which is the equivalent of Parcoursup in England. But I decided against it in the end because of the cost. In France, going to university is pretty much free, whereas in England, it's about £10,000 per year. And I didn't feel like it was worth going back to England to pay £10,000 when I'd enjoy the experience equally well in France.
Okay. And where do you see your future? Looking ahead to your career, so after university, where do you think you might work?
Yeah, I have no idea, to be honest. I'm doing a degree that's internationally based, because I would like to have a career that's quite international. So I'd like to maybe travel either between France and England, or maybe other countries. I don't see myself being just in France or just in England. And if ever I do have a family, I would want my children, if ever I do have any, to have the experience like I did of both England and France. So yeah, to be determined.
Wonderful. And I noticed earlier in your conversation, you used a couple of French words when you're speaking English. Redoubler, for example, you said, but with a nicer accent than mine. Do you find that you often use French words in English or English words in French?
Yes. I think there are just some words that can't be translated. Like redoubler isn't really something that happens often in England, so we don't have a determined word for it. And I think the year groups are different as well. I wouldn't ever say year 10 for troisième or things like that, because to me they're not the same thing. And I'm very lucky, because I was an international section for my lycée. All my friends could speak English, so we would kind of mix between the two languages, and if we kind of did franglais, it was fine. So hopefully that will carry on next year. I just have to be careful when I'm with someone who doesn't speak both languages to think about not flitting between the two.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for talking to me, Tabitha.
Thank you.
Wish you all the best for your, firstly for your university and then for your future career. And maybe I will come back and interview you when you are an international, I don't know what. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.